Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Relationship Talks. I'm your host, Laurie Brooke, and together we will get to take a look at what goes on behind closed doors. Today, I am joined by Paula Yoles.
Hi, my name is Paula Yoles, and I'm here to talk about my relationship with food and myself.
Paula empowers women to end emotional eating. The women she works with know that it's not really about the food, and they are ready to do some deeper, soulful work so they can step out of this exhausting struggle and step into deeper self-love while feeling fabulous in a body just right for her, live a joyous life, and having a lasting, peaceful relationship with food. Paula is the owner and head coach of Body Mind Food Freedom and the founder of the End Emotional Eating with Ease method. Welcome, Paula, and thank you so much for joining me on this week's episode of Relationship Talks. It's really nice to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me, Laurie. Life is all about relationships, I'd say.
It certainly is, and that's why I'm really keen to talk to you. You said that you're here to talk about our relationships with food and how that impacts our relationships with self. Before we go down that path, can you tell me your story and how you got to be here today talking about this?
Sure. Thanks for asking. So, I grew up in two households because my parents divorced when I was 5. And in both households, food was, we were like eating one meal and talking about the next meal kind of thing. Like food was really just all over in my family in so many different ways. And as I started getting a little older and older, and emotional things started getting more complicated or weren't really being supported in the way I needed it, I ended up turning to food as my way to support and soothe myself. I didn't really quite know what I was doing and didn't really understand it because it really started kicking in, I'd say around 6th grade when I was around 12 years old. And I also I don't remember a lot of my childhood. Like there's a lot of big holes in it. And so, but I do know I loved food. I still love food, but it doesn't control me the way it did back then. So I started soothing myself with food at a really young age. And as I got older and older, it started being more and more of that.
So what does soothing yourself with food actually look like? If people are trying to identify if that's them or not, what does that look like?
Well, it can look like different things. For some people, it's binge eating. So they eat a whole bunch and then they don't eat it. And then they eat a whole bunch and don't eat. For some people, it's mindless eating, and that was me on some level. For other people, it's overeating. For other people, it's like nighttime snack attacks. Other people, it's constant eating all day long, like grazers. So it can really look like different things. And for most people, if you're an emotional eater, you're a combination of those things. So for me, it might look like I would wake up and the first thing is I'm already thinking about food. Like, what am I going to have for breakfast? What am I going to bring? I used to be an elementary school teacher. What am I going to pack in my lunch and bring for lunch? And then I'd be at school eating my lunch and being like, do I have time to drive down to the bakery? And if you know anything about elementary school teachers, they don't really have time to do anything. But somehow, because I was so not able to stay with myself and with my emotions, I would figure out how to find the 10 or 15 minutes to run to the bakery to get some cookies, gobble them down on the way back, and then teach the rest of the day. So it was just consuming. And then I get home from work, I go straight to the freezer, grab a spoon, eat my ice cream, and then I'd be eating ice cream. Once Ben and Jerry's and I were like best of friends back then. And I'd be eating one spoon after another, going over my day, thinking like, oh, I can't believe I did this wrong. I think I wasn't nice enough to this person, or I can't believe I said that, or I forgot to do that. Just like whatever it is, just beating myself up while I'm eating, but not even really aware that I'm eating. I was like in a trance, sort of. a negative beat yourself up trance. And then eventually I get to the bottom and I hear thunk, and my spoon was hitting the bottom of the container. And that's when I would sort of get awake out of my trance. And I've heard so many people say that that happens to them where they'll get to the end of the cookie package and not even realize, they'd eaten all the cookies or the potato chips or whatever it is. Or you can even do it with like a bag of baby carrots. Like it could happen with anything. And then when my spoon would hit the bottom of the container and I'd wake up out of that food trance, that's when a different kind of beating up would happen. Then I'd be shaming and blaming myself. You promised yourself you wouldn't do this again. You did it again. How could you do it? You're just putting on more and more weight, and what's wrong with you? And the whole thing. So it's a whole cycle that I was in that I couldn't figure out any way out of. And I was really unhappy.
So then what happened for you to make that step and go, no, enough's enough?
Well, I really thought it was about the food initially, Lori. Like I tried different diets, different ways of eating. I tried taking certain groups of food out of my household, or avoiding ones that I had to have in my household that I thought I shouldn't be eating because I had a child and I was and so and then and I was putting more and more weight on, and I had a lot of health problems. And so I was really focused on the food changes, the food changes. And luckily, I have a friend who was brave enough to call me out on the situation because I was I was unhappy. I was putting one foot in front of the other, and I was trying to figure out how to change my food to make myself feel better and lose the weight because that's what I thought it was all about. And this friend said to me when we were out on a walk, she said, Paula, I'm really concerned about you. You're putting on more weight and you're getting more and more unhappy. I could have gotten so pissed off at her. Right? Like I could have been like, we're done with this friendship. So, but I paused, even though I was scared, and I was like, I had been pretending to myself on some level that I was okay and functioning on top of it. And I thought nobody could notice, but this friend, knew me well enough. And so I took a deep breath and I told her, you're right. And I have no idea what to do. She didn't have any idea what to do either. But this is what I call my first yes to me, my yes to myself, where I just said, like, you're right. And I started being honest with myself that I was miserable emotionally. I was turning to food and I had no idea what to do. A couple weeks later, a different friend who was in a program called the Healers Program, and I knew it had something to do with food, but I didn't really know quite about what it was or whatever. She said, we need some practice clients. You willing to come? And so I said yes to myself again. I was like, has something to do with food. Sure, I'll go. And I went, and her mentor, his name's Tom Monty, her mentor was coming around to the different practice groups, and he blew me away. Like he knew basically nothing about me. Like they introduced my name and told him like maybe two little tiny facts about me. It turns out he can do the ancient art of face reading, so he could read your face. I didn't know that. And I was just like, I'm in. Whatever this man can do and know, I'm in. He just gave me the hope. He gave me the hope that something could change. And I ended up working with him for 2 years. The first year I worked with him, I went in because I wanted to change. I knew, and he ended up holding the container for me to start dealing with what was really the root cause, my emotions, that I didn't have a healthy relationship with myself, that I didn't love myself, whereas I thought it was about the food, and I was loving food big time instead of finding ways to love myself or take care of myself.
Do you think, I want to just take you back a little bit in your story there, when your first girlfriend said to you she was worried and she was concerned, do you think you had to be in a particular mindset at that point to hear that and accept that as opposed to getting angry?
Oh, totally, because it's very easy to deflect if you don't want to deal with, right? So,
Yeah.
and I find that even like happens now, like my best friend, one of my best friends, we've been friends since college. And when you have a friendship where you've been friends so long, and like some weeks we talk like every other day, or whatever, like you're going to push each other's buttons. And sometimes, something will come up and I'll be like, I don't want to talk about that. So yeah, so you have to be in my right mind frame and being willing to be vulnerable with yourself, you know.
So why do you think that day you were happy to actually acknowledge it?
Mm. Because even though on some level I wasn't admitting it to myself, I knew how miserable I was. I knew, and the other piece was I was a mom at that point. My son was about 4 years old then, and I knew I wasn't being a really great mom, and I didn't want to be a mom who things are getting worse and worse and worse, and and just being, I didn't know at the time, but I had, some depression, and because I wasn't dealing with my emotions. And so, and I'm not saying that's the only reason somebody can be depressed, but for me, that's what was the root cause. And yeah, that was one. The other piece is like, I just wanted to be a better mom too. So I think that was a piece of it. That was a good question.
It's one of those things that it's such a powerful factor, isn't it? When we have children and we just want to make sure that we are being the best versions of ourselves for them. But we do at the same time beat ourselves up when we do something wrong. So
Hopefully you do.
how do you, so once you started this work, what did it take for you to actually address the emotions and start really feeling those feelings?
Mhm. I don't think I would have made the kind of progress if I had tried doing it on my own, or if I had tried using like self-help books or following, you know, I don't know, newsletters or, things like that. And I probably would have made tiny little steps, but having a mentor who could hold the space and push me to deal with myself. And I had to be willing to do it, because he could have pushed and I could have been like, I can't do this, because emotionally I would really like sort of escape myself, like go out of myself. He'd ask a question and like I'd start answering like I have no idea what I answered, because I couldn't stay present with myself. Or he'd ask a question and I'd be like, what did you ask me? Because so, but I would keep at it and I would allow myself to bit by bit connect in with myself. And he was able to hold that space of knowing you can feel your feelings. You can honor things from the past that keep showing up in the present. You can heal things around your family dynamics, from the past. Or at that point, I'd end up being divorced. So I had like guilt around that, even though like it was clear it was good that we were separated and divorced, but I didn't, like I had mom guilt and what's that going to do my son? And so, but like having ways in to feel your emotions and not just feel them, but truly honor them and heal things from the past and retrain the brain. That's the other big thing. Our brains get really stuck in certain patterns, right? Like it's like you can be in the car and like maybe you drive to work every day or you drive to the grocery store enough, like I'm sure, I bet you've experienced this where I'm assuming you drive a car, I could be wrong, but where you driving a car and it's like you don't even remember, like you drove to the place and all of a sudden you're there. Yeah, Lori, shake your head, yes. So so that's so ingrained in your brain, right? So that happens also with things in our brain that are not necessarily helpful, where it's like, oh, I can't believe I did that again. Why did you do that again? Or you know, around any topic, or oh, I'm such a bad friend, or I'm not a good mom, or I can't believe I yelled at my son again. And it's just entrenched in there, and entrenched also like from things around our family dynamics. So like my mom was a screamer when I was growing up. When her and my stepfather would yell and they would scream and slam doors. And so for me, like yelling came really quick when something wasn't working well, because I couldn't have a way to stay in my body, stay calm, and be able to figure it out. So I would end up, yelling at my son a lot because of that pattern. So I had to literally learn how to be in my body more, be more connected, feel what's going on, and be like, okay, is this really, like what's going on here with my son? Is it really about us, or is it about something from my past that keeps showing up? So the great thing though is our brains actually can be retrained, can learn new things, can learn self-compassion, can learn other avenues, just like you can learn to drive a new pathway. Like, if there's construction on the road, you have to find a new way to get to your job or the grocery store. So it's sort of like that, like being like, okay, we're not going to take that turn we're used to taking. We're going to help our brain. It takes time. It's not necessarily a quick thing, but it can be done.
And I suppose it would also be, you'd have to be mindful that like it's a conscious decision that you're making, that I don't want to repeat those behaviors or those patterns. I want
Yeah.
to find a new way.
Yes. And then there's different modalities that can support that and help that. So I've studied two different modalities that I use with myself and I use with my clients. Traditional tapping or EFT tapping. Yep. Okay. I don't know if your audience knows what that is. Do you think they do, or?
Some will and some won't.
Okay, so basically you're using your acupuncture points, like where an acupuncturist might put a needle. Instead of putting a needle, you can lightly tap with your fingers on an acupuncture point. And that helps get your energy moving and get your brain out of fight or flight into rest or relax. Just like if you've ever had acupuncture and you put the needles in, it hurts. Tapping yourself lightly won't hurt, but but then your body kind of goes into relaxation when you're on the acupuncture table after the needles are in. So it's the same thing with the tapping lightly in your body. So that modality, and then also I use something called empowerment chakra tapping, which uses visualization, uses connecting into your younger self, whether that's like 6 weeks ago your younger self, or like 20 years ago younger self. Yep. And combined with traditional tapping, so that it gets your brain out of fight or flight. It honors things from the past that keep showing up in the present, and you use the visualization to help you connect and honor and shift and change. And it gets the brain out of fight or flight. It gets the brain into rest or relax, and it opens it up to new possibilities then. And the cells in your brains and on an energetic level in your different energy centers, your chakras, take that in and heal things. And so there's ways to speed up the change, but yes, there has to be this piece of consciousness too. It's not just me doing it with you, or some other healer doing it with you. You also have to do things in between.
You have to be proactive. But at the end of the day, if we want change, we need to take those steps to create that change.
Exactly.
So, Paula, when you were talking about going through this process, how long did it take for you to actually feel like you've deepened that relationship with yourself? You've created a relationship with yourself, and you can see for yourself that you're no longer turning to food to mask those emotions?
So there's three-part answer. Part one is within a year, I saw a huge shift and change. And I just like was feeling happy and alive and vibrant, and starting to see that I was being a better mom. And the extra weight on my body was just coming off from doing emotional work and making tiny changes to my food. not like huge drastic changes. And then by the end of 2 years, it was more solid. And then the other piece though is on some level, it's a life journey because we can't stop eating. We have to eat to live. And food is such a part of so much culture and society and holidays and celebrations, and it's just constant, like, so there's a constant dance of that on certain levels. Just this weekend I got together with some friends. It was one of my friends' birthdays, and so there was a cake, and I don't normally eat refined sugar because it makes me have huge negative mind chatter. It took me a while to figure that out, and I also really wanted a little piece of the cake. So, I had to have like a whole discussion with myself, a relationship discussion with myself. Do I really want this piece of cake? Why do I want it? So there's different levels to it, but I could have the discussion much quicker now and come to a peaceful decision like, yep, I'm having a small piece. And that was it. And I was happy and I enjoyed it. And there was no guilt or shame attached hanging over. Whereas, at the end of the 2 years, it would have been a much harder decision than now, where I'm about 16 years out.
So when you're doing this work with clients, is there a risk that they get some success at the start within that first year, and then they think they've conquered it all, and so they go back into those old patterns because they don't feel like they need to keep doing the work? Or do people actually realize that that work is ongoing?
Well, working with me, they realize the work's ongoing because I'm open and honest about it. I don't present it as a quick fix ever. And some of my clients work with me for 3 months, some clients it's a year or a little more. It just varies. And is there the risk of that happening? Sure. I mean, everybody's human, so I'm not going to pretend that that's not a possibility. But when you're in my world, I'm talking about that it's a journey. There's different layers to it, because life keeps presenting us challenges and things we have to deal with, like, so I'm still doing my work. Like, I'm working right now with an inner child therapist because I was ready for the next layer to go deeper into things that, like I said, I think I said at the beginning, I said at the beginning, like, there's pieces of my childhood that I don't remember. Well, wisely, my brain did that in the moment, in the past, for whatever reason. I'm at a place now where I want to try to see if I can figure that out. And I need the support. So I found the support. So it's a journey. So
It's I suppose our emotional layers, though, I always liken it to an onion. You can always peel another layer off. There's always something else underneath.
I'm chuckling because that's exactly what I say. Exactly what I say. I'm like, yeah, if you had said, if any of my clients heard you say that, they would have been like, yeah, Paula says same thing. It's an unending onion. There's always another layer. But it gets to be layers of joyful tears instead of onion, crying because you're cutting the onion.
No weird looking glasses for any of us. So what have you found to be the most helpful, I suppose, tool or strategy to use when you're faced with, I suppose, the challenges that life does throw you?
Well, a big piece is the preventative work, I would say, like what do I need to do on a daily basis so that I'm not in constant stress, I'm not in fight or flight constantly, because when you're an emotional eater and you're actively an emotional eater, you're in fight or flight and stress and overwhelm basically 24/7. So doing things like, for my body, gentle stretching, making sure I get a walk outside every day, um, eating foods that were good, healthy nourishment for my body. I had to, figure that out. And that was one of the things I got support with when I was going through my transformation. Um, and and so those kind of basic things that society actually tells us we don't have time to do, and getting good sleep. So those are the basics, but they're really the foundation. And then the other piece is emotional wellness things. And for me, that is in addition to all those other things I just mentioned, because those help with emotional wellness. But for me, that's also, I'm highly conscious of what I feed my brain via my ears. Like, I stay away from listening to things that make me feel bad, whether that's a song or a TV show or a movie. Some of my friends were going to see a movie recently. I'm not going to say the name, but it was a dark movie, and my friends were like, "Come, you can just cover your eyes." And I'm like, "No." I'm like, "No, I don't do that. No, no, no." So I think that's just as important, what you feed your ears, and then also what you read too. So that's the other piece for me that helps, so that way I'm in a better state when there's, foods that are sort of sexy around that I want to eat.
But that makes so much sense, because there is so much information that kind of comes in through, listening to things, looking at things, reading things, that we don't recognize at that point in time that we're actually absorbing it all.
Right.
And it can have that big impact on us, on how we are feeling. So where are you now in all of this? In your whole journey, where are you with your relationship with yourself?
Well, I mean, I shared a little bit that I'm doing some more inner child, growth
Yep.
work, so that I can feel more connection to myself, understand more from my childhood, and maybe the pieces that are missing will come back. Maybe they won't. That's okay. And I'm working on giving myself more permission to cook more for myself, because I actually love cooking. And I stopped elementary school teaching about 2 years ago. So I was running my business nights and weekends. And somehow when I was doing all that, I made more time for cooking, even though now I'm home working for myself. So I've had to emotionally work on, like, no, you can take the time to cook yourself delicious, healthy food. You actually like, for me, cooking's creative. It's like doing a painting or something. So it feeds my soul emotionally. So I'm on that part around the food, and then the emotions that I'm working on, doing the piece of finding out more about my childhood and feeling better about myself more and
Lovely.
more.
And how has your relationship with your son improved?
Oh, drastically. He's 21 now. And yeah, so I miss my boy, but we just spent a week in Florida. We live in the United States, so visiting my mom. And so my son and I were together, staying in an Airbnb together. So we had a lot of time together. And it was just really lovely. Like, we went for walks on the beach together and talked, and like, he'll put his head on my shoulder, even though, like, he's like, I forgot how tall he is. I'm 5'1.5". He's 6'1" or 2. I don't know. He's tall. I can't remember how tall. Like, everybody's taller than me when you're 5'1.5", and the half's important. So everybody's taller than me. So I don't remember exactly. Maybe he's 5'9". I don't know. But he's like, it's a big deal for him to like lean over and put his shoulder on me, because he's so, like, when he stands above me, his chin is above my head. So yeah, and we actually were talking about the other day around, like, how I used to yell at him a lot. Somehow it came up, and that I don't do that anymore. And I'm working on, like, not telling him what to do, because I forget he's 21. So my mom still tells me sometimes what to do. Your mom might,
Yep.
if she's alive too. Yeah.
Yep.
So, or I'm assuming you have a mom. So yeah, so I just feel really blessed that I was able to figure out how to shift things, and that we have a really nice relationship now.
Beautiful. So I have one last question for you, Paula. What do you think
Okay.
the secret to your relationship is?
That I'm committed to doing as much self growth as I need to do so that I can feel good about myself and raise that more and more each year. That it's not like, oh, I did it, I'm done. And no, it's ongoing commitment to feeling as best as I can and expanding that every year as I can. And some years it expands more than others, but I'm not willing to stay stuck.
That is beautiful. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Laurie. I really loved your questions.
You're very, very welcome. Have a wonderful night.
You too.
And thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Relationship Talks. If you can, I would love for you to jump on and leave a review. And whilst you are at it, don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Please join me again next week when we get to take a look behind closed doors at someone else's relationship. But until then, I am your host, Laurie Brooke, and remember the choice is yours, so make today and the week the very best it can be.